Tying up another Thunder Creek streamer today from Keith Fulsher's book. This is a silver shiner with a tail. I wanted to do this one because the basic Thunder Creeks are just the white and or a darker colored bucktail, with the heads pretty much all being processed the same. But it's the body and what you put underneath all that that helps it to mimic other particular bait fish. I've done a largemouth bass, I've done a smallmouth, I've done a emerald shiner, and a marabou. I think it was a marabou shiner. Anyway, this one, he takes some lesser covert feathers off of a hen's cape, pheasant hen cape, and actually glues them together and cuts out this little tail. Just a little touch there. And most of this is just to show you the different variations in these flies that you can do, so that if you have a particular bait fish in your area you'd like to experiment and do something like this with, maybe you can put some regular speckled hen together and make a tail on this. It's just another way of doing these particular flies. I just find these Thunder Creek streamers very interesting. So that's the silver shiner with the tail. I'll get started tying. So I'm going to start the silver shiner with the tail Thunder Creek streamer with my hook in the vise. This is a Mustad R75S in a size 6. I'll go ahead and debarb that hook. And I'm going to attach my thread. For thread, I'm using a Danville 70 Denier in white. And I'm not going to, you could attach the thread right behind the eye and put a base layer of thread down if you want. Speed things up a little bit. I'm not going to, because I'm going to be coming back up, tying in the tinsel for the body up here and putting a double layer of tinsel in. If you wanted to have a little bit more thread just for a little bit more of a thread base, you could certainly do that. But I'm just going to attach it right at the point of the hook, and I'm going to advance it back to about the barb. This is where I'm going to tie in the tail. The tail on this is just a couple of, they call them lesser covert feathers. They're wing feathers, smaller, not as pronounced. And these are two of them that are glued together. They're put together concave side, concave side. You could use a rubber cement on this, or I've used flex coat on this. It's up to you. But you're going to glue these all together, and basically you're going to strip the fluff off, and you're going to you can cut the tip out if you want, where you get the majority of this. You're going to glue that together, and then you're going to trim it. So then you just try to trim around the edges here. Got to be a little careful. Mine, I trimmed them a little too early and they slipped on me. You can see right under here where this one right here slipped out a little bit. So just pay a little attention to that. But I think for the most part, as a fishing fly, it'll work. But that's our tail going in right here. I like to keep this part of the rachis long. As you probably can see, the rachis tends to, because of its curvature, cross over each other. So this one right here is this top feather, and this one right here belongs to the bottom feather. But I'm going to put these side by side here. That's why I leave them just a little bit long. The other thing is when you go to tie this in, they're going to want to roll on you. So what I like to do when I tie this in is I like to set it up here, and then I'm going to cant the whole thing my way. So instead of having it straight up and down on the hook shank like this, and then when I start to tie it in and put a little tension on it, it kind of rolls out this way. I'm going to actually cant it back this way towards me. So when I add a little bit of thread tension, it'll actually bring it right up into position on top. By the way, if you don't have, this is a hen pheasant. if you don't have a hen pheasant skin or access to the lesser covert feathers, then you could use almost any hen feather. You use speckled hen or something like that, or if you've got grizzly hen, anything that's going to kind of give you that nice thick profile, lots of barbules on the barbs, so that it's not transparent or anything. It just has kind of some nice substance to it. So as you can see, you kind of have to fiddle with this a little bit sometimes to get those just right. You can, if you want to, take some flat pliers to the rachis and try and flatten those down. It generally doesn't work for me because the rachis tends to, it will roll and flatten. Well, it rolls to its flatter side inside the jaws, and so that doesn't, like I said, work for me. But sometimes you just fiddle with it a little bit here and there, and you get those so they're pretty much perpendicular. It's not going to stay that way. Keep that in mind. They're going to get beat up. They're going to get moved around, things like that. So I wouldn't get too, bent out of shape about it. I'm going to trim these pretty much the length of the body. Remember, the body on these Thunder Creek flies is about 2/3 the shank length, and the head is going to be about 1/3 of the shank length. And I'm just wrapping this in as kind of an underbody here, going a little forward. This is where I'm going to tie in the tinsel. Now, the Silver Shiner has a tinsel body. I'm using some Danville silver and gold mylar tinsel in a size 10. I'm going to tie this in with the gold side up. Because this is going to be a fishing fly, I'm going to reinforce that tinsel a little bit here. I'm just going to fold that over there and press down to get that crease for where that tinsel is going to go over. But before I wrap that tinsel in, I am going to put this is some Flex Cement. I'm going to put a thin layer of Flex Cement on those thread wraps right here. What that will do is it will adhere the mylar tinsel to that thread. Problem with the mylar tinsel is it has a lot of memory to it. What that means is that if when you're wrapping this in, you lose control of it, it immediately will all unravel on you. Even though this is a double layer here, it would unravel almost all the way to the back and start coming back up if it's can keep unraveling. So the flex coat basically helps to adhere it to the thread. It'll squeeze up in between and it will adhere the second layer to the first. It just gives a little reinforcement. So if you're fishing it and a fish gets a hold of it and breaks it, then it doesn't all come unraveled. Hopefully the fly will last you a little bit longer. So the rest of the Silver Shiner is like a lot of other Thunder Creek flies. There's a white belly, and in this case a brown bucktail for the back. I'm going to advance my thread all the way forward up here right behind the eye of the hook. Be tight up against the eye of the hook there. I've got some brown bucktail. I'm going to actually take some of the hair that's lower down in the bucktail. It's a little bit straighter. I've already stacked this so that I have the tips fairly even. Keep that moist so that it keeps those collected. Really, and I can't stress enough how sparse the bucktail is on the top and bottom. If I were to count all of those, I'd be surprised if I had more than 20, 22 fibers in that. You really don't need a whole lot. I'm going to tie this in so that the tips, when they're folded back, will go just a little bit past the tail. Gently, a couple, 2-3 wraps to collect those down. Make certain I've got them positioned on top of the hook shank. Now I'll tighten up my wraps a little bit as I work down the inside of the head, down towards the body. I don't have to have touching turns here. I just want to get that hair all collected down. As I've done with other Thunder Creek videos, you want to keep that hair moist. Just you can have a dish of water. That's what Keith Fulsher in his book recommends. Just keep a dish of water right there. You can wet your fingers. I generally just use a little saliva, but it's up to you. You just want to keep those moist because they'll stick together and they don't flare out on you and get mixed up with any other hair. So now I'm going to turn this over. I've got my white already picked out. Same thing. I'm lucky if I have, 20, maybe 22 or 23 hairs in this whole stack. And I'm going to tie these in so that they are just short of the brown. I don't necessarily, you can have them the same length if you want, but I tie them in just so they're just a little bit shorter. 2, 3, 4 wraps to kind of collect those down. And then I'm going to start putting a little more tension on my thread as I work my way down. And that's really binding it in so it's right there on that side, the underside of the hook shank. You can probably see here why having that moistened is going to help to control these hairs so they don't get all mixed up together. Now, if you'll look, my thread, I didn't wrap the white all the way up to behind the eye of the hook. And even the brown is a little shy of it, but I do want to make certain they're both even. So I'm going to come back up here, and I'm going to wrap that white in just a little bit more, making certain I keep the brown separate. I don't want that brown to flare or anything and get mixed up. Put those wraps right there behind the eye of the hook, double checking that I have both the white and the brown lashed down at the same spot. And they seem to be okay, so I'll advance my thread back down to the end of the head so we can bring those back and lash them in. Always take some time to moisten this hair to kind of keep it separate. It really goes a long way to making it easier to make these flies. Take the brown, fold it back over. I've got these under some tension. I don't want any of them loose. I'm going to get 2 or 3 wraps in to get those down to the hook shank. Now I'm kind of squeezing this with my thumb and forefinger, spreading those around a little bit so that they go around the upper half of the hook shank. A few wraps to secure that in. Take a look at it. See, I've got one that got kind of loose there. You can always unwrap this if that happens. Get it all the way undone, and sometimes you can just pull those back and you'll pull that out. If not, just unwrap it all the way. Start the whole process over again. All the more reason to not have, 30 or 40 hair fibers in here when you're doing this, so that you're not having to manage all of those. You just have a small subset. I'm going to turn this over, do the same thing for the white. That hair seems to be flaring out a little bit, but we'll do something to help that in just a second. 3 or 4 wraps in and push down on that a little bit to spread that around. The idea is you don't want to have any thread wraps showing on the sides right here. You want that all to be covered up. Again, I got some that got kind of loose in there, so I'm going to unwrap that and do that again. Securing that in, I've got everything pretty much covered up there. What I'm going to do to help keep this from flaring out so much, I'm going to collect these down, make certain I'm covering everything up there. I'm going to get a couple of loose collecting wraps off the back end here. They're not tight at all. They're just securing that down. Then I'll wrap that forward. I'll put in my whip finish. And then trim away my thread. Now I don't put any head cement on this right now because I'm going to put some epoxy on this. All these Thunder Creek flies, you can use epoxy. I've done some of them with solar res, a resin if you want to use that instead. Another thing, if you want to help this from, flaring and being more streamlined, one thing you can do is you could wrap some lead wire right back here, collecting this down. And when we put our epoxy on, just put a little bit of epoxy past the threads here. That will hold those down along the hook shank like this, just enough so that that hair doesn't flare. But I think this is more than enough right here. So I'll get some epoxy mixed up. And in just a second, I'm using this is a Devcon 2-part epoxy. They label it as a 2-ton epoxy. It's a 30-minute epoxy. So I'm just going to put equal parts out here. The procedure is to put a layer of epoxy on, and then you're going to paint the white portion of the eye on, as well as the red gill marks. And then once that dries, that's an enamel paint. Once that dries, you're going to paint the black on. Once that dries, we put another little layer of epoxy over the eyes to help protect them. So I'm going to stir this up, and in a second I will apply that and demonstrate that as I apply it. So I've got my epoxy all stirred up, and what I'm going to do is just start in the middle here. I'm just going to take and put a little half drop on there and start spreading it around. You don't want to make this real thick. You want it thin, just enough to cover the hairs. So just be a little careful with, how much you're putting on here. We can take some off. That's not a problem. It is a 30-minute epoxy, like I said, so you have a 30-minute, pretty close to 30-minute work time. It'll start to thicken up around 20-25 minutes. But for the most part, you've got a long work time on this, so just take your time with it. Get just a thin layer of epoxy right where you want it. Smear away the rest. If you've got some excess, we can just take that down the body here. That will all level itself out. We're going to put just a little bit on the thread right here. This is why I didn't put any head cement on this, because these thread wraps are all going to be covered up in epoxy. You've never worked with epoxy and fly tying before, it's great stuff, and it can be used in all kinds of different flies to different effects, what you need it for. The one downside with the epoxy is generally you have to have a fly turner. You use a 5-minute epoxy, but the 5-minute epoxy, in my experience, it is more brittle, it cracks more, flakes off more, and will also much quicker get kind of a yellow haze to it. So I generally try to avoid it if I can. So I will put this in a fly turner, and it'll turn for 2-3 hours. I'll stop the turner, but it will probably set for overnight for about 12 hours before I paint anything on that, because I want to make certain it's 100% set up and tack free. So we'll put that on the turner, and we're ready for the next step. We'll come back and paint some eyes on. Okay, so it's been a few hours for our silver shiner, and the epoxy on the head is all solid and tack free and everything. So it's time we're going to put the white portion of the eyes on and the red portion of the gill flash on, and then we'll let that dry and come back and get the black on there. So I'm just taking a toothpick. I've done this in some of the other videos. This is just the wide part of the toothpick here for the white, dunking that down into the enamel paint. I don't want to get a whole lot on there. I just want to get half of a drop or so. I'm going to put that right on the side. Turn this around. I want to try and get that in the same spot. Get a little bit more. And there's the white portion for the eyes. Let's try and get a little bit more on this. There we go. That will dry and flatten out. It takes a bit of practice. I'm still not all that great at it. I do it so infrequent with the eyes, but that gets the eyes. Now we're going to put some red enamel right down on the lower portion of the thread wraps right here. That's going to be kind of our little gill flash. Now, can't stress this enough. You want to definitely have a very, very small amount of red on your bodkin here. And you want to try and make certain that that does not get onto the bucktail. It will bleed up the bucktail. All you're going to do, I mean, I have a quarter of a drop maybe there, and you're just going to spread that around the lower side of those thread wraps. So that will get the gill flash and the white portion of our eyes. Once that's dried up in a few hours, we'll come back, we'll put the black pupils in, and then after that has also dried up in a few hours, we will get a little bit of epoxy on the eyes again to help protect those. So it's been a couple hours. It's time to put the black center pupil on here. I'm using another toothpick, but on this one, whereas on this toothpick, it was cut off at the thick part of the toothpick, this one is actually cut off at the tapered part right here. That just gives me a smaller diameter for the actual center pupil of the eye. Again, I'm just going to get myself a little drop right here. I don't need quite that much. I'm going to tap that in the center. Often they don't quite go right the way you want them in the center. But you just want to get it right in the center like that. Now, a couple more hours or so, we'll let that set up, and then we're going to come back and we're going to put coat of epoxy over those eyes just to help protect those eyes. So it's been about 2 hours, I think, since I put the black pupils on our silver shiner here. I think they're pretty much set up. I could probably let them go for a couple more hours and they'd be even firmer, but I'm needing to get this done, so I'm going to go ahead and put the outer coating of epoxy just around on the eyes, just being real gentle and ginger so that I don't poke and or somehow alter that black pupil on there. You just want to put just a very, very small amount right around here. You don't want to, you can tell there's a little bit kind of like a bulge on the side of it. And that's not bad. I mean, the eyes, the paint itself did a little bit of that. I have not perfected the technique as Keith Fulsher has, if you look in his book, to where they're much flatter. I tend to get these little bulges on the side, but that's all right because it actually kind of magnifies the eyes just a little bit. This is mostly to protect those eyes from the fish as you are fishing the fly. If you want, you could actually even put just a little bit right here on the gill flash just to give it a little bit of extra protection if you want to. Now I'll have to put that on the turner. This is the same Devcon epoxy I used before, and so it will droop if I just let it sit there. So I'll have to put that on the turner again for a couple of hours, then let it set, and then I'll let the whole thing set for at least 24 to 48 hours. Then everything will be all solid and firm. But that completes the silver shiner with the tail Thunder Creek streamer. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. What's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.